What have we learned about the rookies Collin Murray-Boyles and Alijah Martin? Who are Toronto's best bench wings, and what are our favorite bench lineups? That's coming up on today's Locked On Raptors.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It's your favorite part of the day. Thanks for making Locked On Raptors your first listen every day. I'm Vivek Jacob. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors for 8 seasons across several outlets. You can follow Locked On Raptors on X, Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube. And be sure to check out the Locked On Raptors Discord, where you can talk all things basketball, but especially the Raptors. It is Tuesday, July the 22nd, and I am joined by a friend of the program, the main man over at the Hello and Welcome podcast. It is William Liu. What's happening, brother?
What's up, man? How you doing, dog? You alright? You good? You good?
I'm good, man. I'm transitioning from, Summer League to just watching the Blue Jays. I think last night was the first full Jays game that I watched on TV. I've been to one game this season.
You gotta tap in, man.
I'm tapping in now. This team is on fire.
Destiny, man. This is the team of destiny. The Jays win every close game. They win every lucky break. I mean, the Yankees yesterday just couldn't throw to first base for some reason.
Yo, that was crazy. That was crazy.
Amazing stuff, man. But yes, Raptors for now. What's going on?
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing the Yankees make a bunch of rookie mistakes. We will talk about the rookies to start us off. Collin Murray-Boyles, Alijah Martin, you were up close in Vegas. I think before we get into the actual play on the court, having a chance to talk to these guys, obviously you had the great interview with Collin Murray-Boyles' brother as well. What have you maybe learned about CMB, and I know you're big on Alijah as well, about them as people that encourage you about their fit with the Raptors?
Yeah, I think first with Collin, definitely has a lot of like little brother vibes. You know, you could tell that he has an older brother who's like 7, 8 years older than him, who also played basketball. His older brother's name's James. James was at Summer League as well. That's like the whole family was kind of there. I mean, you forget always just how young these guys are once they enter the league. Like, he's 20 years old. I thought he's almost a little bit nervous. The couple of times that we were able to sort of like speak to him in the scrum setting. There's one time he talked post game, and it was very adorable seeing like everybody crash his post game scrum. He was so excited to finally get to speak as well. Like, I had like the usual vlogger setup where I had like a handheld camera and then one of those like, you could basically, you're supposed to put it on your body, but it's like a lav mic that you're supposed to hold and stuff. And he was just like, oh, this, and he just took it out of my hand and he just held it for the whole interview. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cute. Like, you could just see like the excitement and just how like, I think he's a pretty smart guy as well. I think that he's sort of like, he's pretty aware of himself. I think probably in the back of his mind, he's probably thinking about his first viral moment, which obviously was his draft reaction. And he's since explained it so many different times, but I think it's still a little bit sort of in the back of his mind of like, okay, let's make a good first impression. But he's generally speaking, I think, a pretty smart kid. And that's him. Alijah, I liked what Darko said about him because, Darko was just like, yeah, I don't know. He's just like a man. Like, he's like already fully, like he's all the way fully there. He's very mature. He's very confident. Already kind of speaking like a vet. His backstory is pretty incredible. I got to know his backstory even a little bit more than Collin's. And the fact that, like, he comes from this like tiny town of like, I mean, we were debating whether it was 1,500 or 2,000 people, but you know what I mean? Like, what are we even debating at that point, right? A tiny town in Mississippi, about an hour's north of New Orleans. And, his mom is such a strong presence in his life, made a lot of sacrifices growing up, wasn't really particularly blessed financially, but he grew up from this like really, really close-knit community. And basically something clicked for him in like his sophomore year at university, and that really allowed him to put them on this track of just being like a winner and being really serious and really competitive. And so, yeah, I mean, I think two pretty different people in terms of just like their personalities, but I'm pretty excited to see how they do in Toronto.
Awesome. No, that's good. Good to hear. Obviously they've got CMB, as you say, has that youthful exuberance, and Elijah obviously has that point to prove mentality, and maybe some of those norm comps kick in. But yeah, looking at their play on the court, CMB doesn't play the first game. Then the second game, he looks like he's just kind of getting adjusted, trying to do a bit too much, and then kind of finds his rhythm from there. Struggled in the semis. I thought the size was an issue for him to deal with. And then just in general, I think on the offensive end wasn't nearly as assertive as he could have been. I think what was super encouraging when he had the 20 and 9 was that it's like, oh, okay, like Jacoby's struggling, Jamal's struggling, AJ Lawson struggling. Like I gotta see what I can do, and that didn't really happen in the semis. And with Alijah, obviously, the first game right away, everyone's like, okay, we got to know who this kid is. He's like trying to make posters every chance he gets. He's, he's driving to the rack, finishing with the left. You're like, who is this player? But then obviously we saw that kind of stabilize over the course of the 5 games. I thought he finished strong. I thought he was like an important spark in fueling the comeback that the Raptors had to make it a game against the Kings. And I thought he was decent against the Warriors as well. When you think about what the scouting report was and what we kind of learned about them going into the draft, through the draft process, what is something maybe new that you saw at Summer League that you're intrigued to see more of?
I mean, I think Collin actually being willing to shoot the three. Like, I think that that's going to be an ongoing development for him. He's a classic Raptors forward. Does a lot of things, but is not particularly adept at shooting. So like you're always curious in terms of like how he's gonna get on as a shooter. I remember like it was they're very different players. But like I remember when Scotty was first drafted and we were watching him in Summer League. By the way, Scotty had a great Summer League that year. But like he did knock down some threes and he was like confidently looking to sort of like hunt some of those. I remember I think Scotty's maybe first basket at Summer League back then. He hit a three and he yelled at the camera. He's like, bang, and then he put the B word out there too. I don't want to swear on your program, but like it was just very like Scotty-esque, right? So I was happy to see Collin actually try out some threes. I actually asked him about it one of the I think his first game. And it was a bit awkward because I'm like, hey man, you airball the three, but like how much are you working on the three? And he was like, yo, it's okay. Like he was like had a really positive attitude about it. He's like, yeah man, that's gonna happen. But I think that I was happy to see him knock down a couple threes. My main curiosity actually with Collin was just like since he played so much at the rim in college and there was a lot of like bully ball stuff, like is he gonna be able to actually convert and finish? I think he actually ended up finishing just perfectly fine. It's weird because if I thought that if the Raptors were going to go to Summer League, I thought they would probably try to play the same style that they played with the main club, and I just never saw that. Like, the main team, I feel like they play a lot through the post and the half court. They play through a lot their centers, and obviously the personnel is totally different. It's one thing to play through Jakob, it's another thing to play through like Ulrich or like Colin Castleton. But it was a lot of just pick and roll with Jamal and Jacoby. And so Collin was like kind of a distant third option, if you would even call him that. He was just kind of there. Even the game that he had against Golden State, you're mentioning, like he was mostly just like capitalizing and playing within the flow of the offense. Outside the first couple of minutes, I didn't think they featured him that much. I think a lot of that deals back to the fact that he had an injury in the draft process that wasn't really reported on too much. But basically, I think he worked out for 2 teams, and then he tweaked something, and so that's really limited how many teams were able to even see him in a workout facility. And then he said the first time he played 5-on-5 was actually that debut in Summer League in the 2nd game. So I can understand how it's like, okay, if he's not up to speed and fully available, we're not going to orient the offense around him. Bit of a missed opportunity though. If he were healthy, I think that it would have been pretty different. And then Alijah, I think for me, it was just like, okay, his size and how much of that's going to like factor into the games. And certainly wasn't shy. I think him and Chucky, for example, are both like Chucky Hepburn. Chucky might be a little bit smaller. He has the afro, so it like makes him look a little taller. But like regardless, we're talking about like 6'1" versus 6 foot. Alijah like went to the rim and he tried to play like a 7-footer. And I appreciate that. Versus I feel like with Chucky, he was like, Yeah, I'm too damn small, man. I don't know if I should go to the rim. I'll kind of swing the ball a little bit more. So,
Yeah.
in that sense, like I guess we knew Elijah was fearless, but I wanted to sort of see him continue to do that in his first taste of the pros, and I think he did that. 3-point shot didn't shoot it that well, but I think he shot the right threes, and that's sort of the way he's got to balance it. He's probably going to be a guy who has to shoot like half of his shots from three and the other half attacking closeouts or transition. Um, so yeah, I mean, about as expected. Although I did want to see a little bit more from Collin, maybe in general, but I think the injury kind of held him back from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I think the one thing we have to touch on is the defense. And I think watching CMB on the defensive side, to me, his positioning is well beyond like a rookie. I think that's the thing that stood out. And I think positionally, he has a really good sense of where to be, when to help, when to tag, uh, when to double.
Yeah,
And I think those are really encouraging signs. And then he just kind of lets his physical attributes take over, right?
yeah,
And so I think that's what was most encouraging about him. Elijah Martin, like obviously he has amazing physical attributes. He's not afraid to get right up in players' jerseys, and apply that ball pressure. That is something the Raptors want to do. So I think defense wise, there's not much of a question to ask, which is a pretty big thing for rookies coming in.
yeah. I mean, I think it's almost with every rookie. Like you're gonna earn your stripes first, and you're gonna earn your minutes by playing defense. And I think the Raptors have really drafted with that in mind. I think really, if you look back at the recent picks outside of Grady Dick, like everybody is like more defensively oriented than offensively oriented, which might explain why the Raptors are so good on defense in summer league and so utterly terrible on offense. Like their half-court offense was maybe
Yeah.
one of the worst in all of summer league. Um, but yeah, like I think that with Colin, it's gonna be interesting too because the one thing that you would say is okay in that Sacramento game in the semifinals you really wanted to see him defensively show up in that matchup because the guy who was hurting him was kind of like a small ball five, although he looked very big as compared to the Raptors centers
Yeah.
in Isaac Jones, but he had 36 points that game. You would have really liked to see him sort of take on that assignment more than anything else and shut him down. I think if they did that, the Raptors could be playing in the finals. Um, I also thought in that game, Colin like kind of decided to double team a lot and kind of leave rotations behind him that, credit to the Kings, they passed out of those. But I also thought that like, okay, some of those are pretty adventurous and maybe sometimes unscripted. And then also thought, you know what, it's weird because Summer League has these vague rules where in the group play you have 10 fouls. But
Yeah.
then for some reason in the semifinals you have your regular 6 fouls. And so, for a team like the Raptors, who their entire summer league mantra was just like, let's play defense and get after them and be dogs, a lot easier to do that when you have 10 fouls in a 40-minute game versus you have 6 fouls in a 40-minute game. And so you
Yeah.
saw Colin also hit some foul trouble as well. Those are all small things to adjust. I think that's like, you just have to understand like the level of competition you're playing at. And then you got to get a sense of like what you can get away with, what you can't get away with. I think in general, he showed so many defensive smarts and his instincts are so good, like you mentioned, that like, he's going to adapt and he's going to play well sort of at all levels and be disruptive. So I'm not worried about that. And then Elijah, I think that like, he understands that like the first, couple of years, I think when I interviewed him, he said kind of like the first 2-3 years, like he's kind of looking at like a Davion Mitchell, looking at like a Lou Dort type in terms of like being able to sort of be that 3 and D. And then after a certain point where it's like, okay, you're set in the league, you probably got your second contract, then you can start to explore more of the offensive side. And I think that, maybe there's more potential there. I think we didn't get to see him handle the ball a lot, but defensively, he's strong. He can pressure full court. He's probably not as good at that as like Jamal Shed or even Checky Hepburn, but still can really, really put a lot of pressure up there. And then I just think he's just like watching the game. He's kind of like I don't know. He just like bangs into people a lot. Like he's just like a banger. Like it's weird. Like I guess it's like a hockey comparison would be like Max Domi, like for like the Leafs in the same way where smaller guy, but just like constantly he's mixing it up. Like
He's letting people know he's there.
yeah, like when there was that fight that happened in the Denver game, obviously he bumped the guy, whatever. He didn't intentionally bump him and try to hurt him. But he bumps the guy, going out of bounds. He gets called for a flagrant one. I think that's more because of the injury more than anything else. But then you saw like just how much like the other team wanted to fight him, and I was like, at least once per game, I'm like, yeah, guys want to really fight Alijah because he's either like knocking them on their ass or he's getting knocked on his ass, and so just not afraid of contact, which I think for small guards is like absolutely vital. Like obviously we had a lot,
Yeah.
someone like that in Kyle, so I like that fearlessness about him. I don't know how that specifically translates to winning basketball, but it's fun to watch at least.
Yeah. Coming up next, we are going to talk about Toronto's bench wing options. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. In addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Having all my accounts in one app has been a game changer, and it is so much easier to figure out exactly what I'm doing with all my money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. And we are back, Will, talking to you about Toronto's bench wing options. We know that RJ Barrett and Brandon Ingram are going to be at the shooting guard and small forward positions to start. So it's about who's behind them. We've got Grady Dick, Ochai Agbaji, Jacoby Walter, Jamison Battle, AJ Lawson. Coming into training camp, I assume Grady Dick will get the most opportunity. Obviously, defensively, he probably is behind everybody else. But I think when you look at this team's needs, the three-point shooting, his ability to shoot off movement, that's something that's so unique to this team that I anticipate he'll get the most opportunity. And then I think it gets really close between Ochai Agbaji and Jacoby Walter. It might just come down to, hey, who's actually just shooting the ball better at this point? Even though I do think Jacoby right now is showing that he could be the better defender. And then I think, Jamison Battle is going to be very much like a situational play. It might come down to, are there injuries impacted the team? Is Grady Dick not available? Or, things of that nature. AJ Lawson, as well as he played in Summer League, I think is going to be not even situational. It's just going to come down to injuries. It's going to come down to just having the right stretch of the season where, things are just lining up for him to get playing time. Is that kind of how you see it?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I think AJ was like by far the Raptors' best offensive player in Summer League, and a lot of these guys obviously were. You're mentioning here outside of Grady did play in Summer League, but it's also a matter of like how much our teams invested in you. If they put a first round pick into you, you're gonna get a lot more minutes than if they signed you, as a free agent. It just kind of is what it is. Yeah, and it's. I had this like quick combo with Bobby during Summer League, and I'm just like, what do you think of your roster? And he's like, I think we have 12 guys who can play. Which I don't think that like everybody. Well, I don't think anybody's going to play a 12-man rotation, but we also know that there's obviously lots of injuries. The Raptors have been hit hard with injuries the last 2 years. And I also do think that like if the style that Raptors want to play is like you're pressing full court, if Darko's going to become Jurgen Klopp and gegenpress all over the court, like you're probably going to need a lot of substitutions for that. It probably is more advantageous to run a deeper rotation. I think we just saw, for example, Indiana had a similar sort of at least defensive identity, let's say, and then OKC certainly had that as well. I'm not comparing the talent. I'm just saying that like that's sort of the idea that they want to play with, and they all play with deeper rotations. So
Yeah.
I actually wouldn't be too surprised if the Raptors initially started the season with kind of like a 10-man rotation. You have a full bench, you have a full starting lineup, and we'll see sort of where injuries sort of affect you from there. Which does obviously still leave two, I think, playable guys out the rotation. The shooting guard position is very crowded. just in general, but I do think that they'll give Jacoby more chances than Ochai. Honestly, if depending on how much Jacoby breaks out over the course of the year, I could definitely see Ochai as like a trade candidate. I think he certainly did really well last year. But primarily as a spot starter because again of those aforementioned injuries. But if you're looking at long term, you've also invested in two shooting guards in Grady Dick and Jacoby. I just don't really see how Ochai really fits into that. Plus, I think he actually has good value. I think he actually outplays his contract, and I think that it's like a relatively easy thing for the Raptors to do if they can turn him into like some draft compensation and essentially duck the luxury tax as well in doing it. So it's a very convenient sort of silver bullet solution to sort of solve a lot of things. But yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just quickly, because I've been thinking about the Ochai situation, and from a Raptors perspective, there's no real need to offer the extension right now because you can just say, hey, okay, you had this really nice season. You shot 40% from three, became like this analytics, like, layups and dunks plus threes guy. You can defend at a solid level. I wouldn't call him a great defender.
Yeah.
But there's no real incentive to offer the extension because you're going to have a much smaller role. Your numbers will likely be down. We don't know if you're going to shoot the ball at the same rate. And then we're in a better negotiating position. But at the same time, you do that, his trade value goes down, right? And so is the best case scenario for the Raptors to trade him before the season begins?
I just generally think that if you're not really going to extend him, or maybe if you're not close on an extension, and we haven't heard any reporting on this, like this might be the least mentioned player on the Raptors might be Ochai Agbaji, but but if you're not close to that extension, I think that like in terms of as a value play, I think you try to move him. I guess Precious was the last guy the Raptors had in this sort of similar situation where you're going to the third year of your rookie scale contract and I mean, at that time, Precious, I think, was asking for like 20 million plus. I mean, that was never happening, dog. No matter how much Masai was like, yeah, you're mine now. He's like, you're the Knicks now, basically. after that sort of demand, and so I don't think Ochai's contract demands are that crazy, but I think if you're able to lock him into like good value, I would say like that's probably like maybe under mid level. So we're looking at maybe like 10 a year. Then you probably have to seriously explore because at that point you're just getting a pretty good player. Like you're getting a solid player that you're going to get on good value. But if he wants more than that, I mean, and he might be totally right to do that, especially coming off a career year where he did shoot 50% from the field and 40% from three. Now, granted, like pretty much exclusively, these are transition looks or looks that were generated for him by the offense. But regardless, he played well. Yeah, I just think it's like more convenient to move him considering that there's just like so much logjam at his position. I know there's a lot of talk about like let's move RJ instead. RJ's certainly more expensive, whatever. But RJ's also just better, right? So part of that consideration also comes in for me, and he does something in terms of attacking the basket that a lot of the Raptors guards and wings don't really particularly do well. And it would be harder to move RJ than it would be to move Ochai. That's not to say you should just make the easier decision, but I do think that a lot of things probably point towards like an Ochai transaction simply because there's just so much depth at his position.
Yeah. No, I think you're right there.
He's also 25, man. Like, like AJ Lawson. They were singing "Happy Birthday" to AJ Lawson during the summer league, and I'm like, I just saw Ochai last year summer league at the same age, and I was like, yeah, he's low-key. He played a lot better than Ochai did, but whatever. Those are just summer league, right? So it's only like 2 weeks of just trial ball, basically.
Yeah. But I think a guy like Ochai, it's almost easier to see a role for him in the NBA just because he's someone that AJ thrives on having the ball in his hands, right? And trying to make something happen. But that's just, he's not at that level where he can demand that at the NBA. So I think Ochai being that prototypical role player, it's a more seamless fit into a rotation. And I think there's going to be an opportunity to sell high here, and we'll see if the Raptors can make the most of it. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how things play out between Grady Dick and Jacoby Walter, I think.
For sure.
Because, if Grady struggles defensively, if he can't, I think it's imperative that Grady, considering the role that he'll have this year, because last year you have to, just give him a pass on the shooting percentages because of the role he had to play,
Yeah.
and he was asked to do so much. But this year, he's going to be in the right role. He's going to get a lot of good 3-point looks. He's not going to be asked to take, as many difficult shots as he was last season. So now I think it's imperative that he's close to 40% as a 3-point shooter. And if he's not doing that and he's not defending, then I think Jacoby leapfrogs him in the rotation.
Yeah,
Jacoby's also got to shoot well.
well, that's the thing. Like, both of these shooting guards, even though they're both, like, clearly one of them is going to be a shooting guard of the future, like, I would love for one of them to be close to that, like, consistent, even high 38, 39, that range where, you want your best shooter to be the shooting guard. I think with Grady, part of his effectiveness and part of his value is the fact that he's able to attack on the move. He's able to draw these closeouts. I thought last year, especially the start of the year, I mean, he was sensational at the start of the year. The Raptors had a lot of injuries at that time. Scotty got hurt. IQ went down. And you saw a lot of Grady in a featured role. And I thought that was interesting. I think we're probably, like, not going to be there if we're the Raptors want to be winning anytime soon. But the way he's able to attack off, movement, the way the Raptors are able to run a lot of out of bounds plays for him, and just being a movement shooter in general, I think it's just, like, so much more valuable than like I'd rather take Grady's 35% shooting from three with a lot of movement and just the aggressiveness versus, like, Ochai's 40% shooting from three, but, like, exclusively catch and shoot, set feet in the corner. There's only so many of those that the offense can generate, and, like, you're replacing, like, the maybe like a guy who mostly shoots layups versus a guy who's mostly slashing to the basket. And that there is, like, a pretty big difference, I think, in that. I think Brady's offense probably plays a lot more for that second unit, which is kind of just, like, short on shooting, maybe just across the board. But the difference is Jacoby looks really special defensively, man. I mean, I think that maybe because he's not, like, super raw, just in general, I think he's a little bit more icy in terms of his personality. But that game in Summer League when he had 7 steals, it was just like, this is, like, I don't know, the way he's able to pressure the ball and guard full court. I think that the Raptors second unit, you could definitely see both him and Jamal pressing the whole, length of the floor and creating a lot of havoc and creating a lot of steals. And on that sense alone, like, I just don't think Grady can ever hit that level defensively, especially now that you're seeing Jacoby get stronger and stronger. Now, granted, Grady got stronger as well, but I don't think it really made that much of an impact on his defensive end. Grady, at best, is going to be like an average defender. Sometimes he gets ragdolled as well, which I just don't necessarily like, seeing a guy get overwhelmed just with strength alone. And you don't even usually see that with Jacoby, though. Jacoby, I think, is, like, strong. He's wiry. And again, that ability to guard on the ball is very, very valuable, because all of a sudden you can then see him, for example, Jacoby playing in a backcourt with a guy like Emmanuel Quickly, who isn't as strong guarding on the ball, but you can, it's like, I mean, again, like a huge comparison, but it's like how Clay used to guard the point guards for Steph. There's a huge value when your shooting guard can do that.
Yeah. No, I think this is going to be a really interesting year to see how that shooting guard position plays out. To wrap up, we are going to look at our favorite bench lineups. Back at it here with Will, and looking at our favorite bench lineups. For me, I think this is going to be an interesting year because a lot of people talk about, bench mob 2.0. I actually don't think we're going to see, just a full 5-man bench unit. I think you have 5 very good starters. And so I think it's on Darko to be able to stagger that effectively. And pretty much, I think there should be opportunities to have 2 starters out on the court pretty much at all times. And so when I was looking at these bench units, it's like, hey, which 3 bench guys will complement 2 starters the best? And one lineup that really intrigues me is Emmanuel Quickly, Jacoby Walter, Grady Dick, Collin Murray-Boyles, and Scotty Barnes. I think Obviously, if you're going to have IQ and Grady out on the court, you got to have defense around them. And I think that's where, having Jacoby and CMB and Scotty can be beneficial. Then at the same time, if you're going to have CMB and Scotty out there, you want to have 3-point shooting and some spacing. So that's where you have IQ and Grady. And obviously, Jacoby, you expect him to shoot at a decent clip as well. I think that could be a really fun lineup. Obviously, we want to see the IQ Scotty chemistry grow. So that's going to be an important part in this. And then I think in general, just watching CMB and Scotty defend together in the back line could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean that would be fun. I think your main concern is just like it's small, because I think
it would depend on who the opposing five is.
For sure. But I think you can make it work because of the fact that you have probably your two most versatile defenders in the back line, with CMB and with Scotty Barnes. I think one thing that's been promising too is I think seeing CMB up close, like pretty wide frame. Like it's hard to just like extrapolate like what their total weight is versus like how they sort of like impact the game. I think he could be a pretty good screener, and especially a guy who can play in pick and roll. And so, it depends on whether or not you're going to use Scotty in that pick and roll, because I do feel like if you're going to put like Scotty and CMB in a pick and roll together, I feel like people are just going to switch and really neutralize it. But again, like if you're putting IQ and CMB together, then all of a sudden, like, you can create some more mismatches and you can sort of use them as an effective screener. Yeah, so that'll be kind of interesting, and I like your idea of like being able to balance like shooting and defense, because that's the general issue with the Raptors construct is they either have shooting or they either have defense. So I don't mind that, especially against bench lineups. I maybe on the perimeter you're probably putting a lot of like Jacoby on the opposing point guards, and then you're gonna have to sort of hide IQ a little bit, hide Grady Dick a little bit. But again, like that's a lot more fun than some of the lineups we saw last year. So I like that.
Is there a lineup that you have in mind that you really want to see out there?
Yeah, I think watching the Summer League lineup play together, I actually do want to see. I wouldn't even mind seeing 4 of these guys on the floor once. Like, if you're telling me that Jamal Shed and Jacoby Walter, who I think actually have pretty good backcourt chemistry together, if you're telling me those guys want to play together, and you throw out like Collin Murray-Boyles and even like a Jamison Battle, who it's kind of plug and play, he's just 3-and-D guy you can slide into any lineup. I actually don't mind seeing that lineup with a legitimate center like a Jakob Poeltl. I think that that would help them. I mean, first off, I think if you're going to play that bench lineup, you're probably going to need somebody to organize the offense a little bit for them. As much as Jamal has done a lot of great things, I thought he was really up or really down in Summer League. And so someone to stabilize things. I think also having a center to have him play pick and roll with just creates a lot more space for him to get his game off. I think that's probably the best thing he does right now is play pick and roll. He has that quickness to sort of burst off that high screen, get in the paint, and either shoot that little in-between floater that he's so good at, or just touch the paint in general, cause some mismatches and some scrambles, and then kick it out and stuff. I think if you want to take out Jamison and you want to put in like a guy like RJ, I think that probably helps a lot too. I think with RJ, like it's just so easy for him to score no matter sort of what lineup you're sort of putting him in. And maybe in the starting lineup, it's actually a bit of a detriment just in the sense of like, you already have a lot of other guys who can score. And so therefore you're kind of like not using his scoring as much, but also he's not giving you that much defensively because he's not that good defensively, versus you put him on, with some of these bench lineups. And again, it could be something like Jakob. I guess CMB shouldn't play in this lineup because there's just not a lot of spacing. But like you could put like Jakob and Jamison and RJ sort of together as that sort of like 3-4-5, and then you have your regular backcourt of Jacoby and Jamal. I think that could be pretty interesting too. Especially watching sort of the way that they plan to play with Jacoby and Jamal. They're probably going to force a lot of turnovers, and their ball pressure is going to be great. And so you want someone to capitalize in transition, and RJ is also pretty good at just like being able to leak out and finish in transition. In the open court, he's obviously very athletic and able to get to the rim really well. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the way the Raptors want to go anyway, and just like basically like, hey RJ, like have you met these bench guys? They can't really score, but they can really guard. It's kind of the same idea, really.
Yeah.
Just not as much with shooting, but more with like rim pressure. Because the other thing is like, as much as I like seeing Jacoby play, like still doesn't really put much pressure on the basket at all. And primarily is a jump shooter who gets fouled sometimes in the half court. So you probably want somebody who actually like punch the rim once in a while, and that's RJ.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, I've thought about, because of the role we saw RJ in last year, are there, lineups where, say, if Jamal Shed just doesn't have it, that you put RJ at the point,
You
and
could.
then you surround him, uh, with Ochai and Jacoby, or, maybe Battles in the mix. And then I think you'd ideally, if he is at the point, you would definitely want Yak in the game because those two have had really good chemistry.
Hmm.
Another lineup, this is probably the last one I'll throw out there that I find intriguing, is Jamal Shed, Jacoby Walter, Ochai Abaji,
Mm.
and then Brandon Ingram and Jakob Poeltl.
Okay.
And I think
Okay.
with
Balance.
Shed and Walter, obviously we've seen some concerns with running the half court offense, and that's what Brandon Ingram has been brought in to do, right? So you could try running the offense. It's like, hey, okay, nothing's really coming of this. We can go to Ingram. Hey, Shed, if you're struggling to get something going, you've got Yak out there on the court. You can run a pick and roll with him,
Hmm.
and then create something off of that. You've got Abaji and Walter to defend the perimeter. Obviously, the defense, pretty much if you have Shed, Walter, Abaji, and Yak, whatever concerns you might have about Ingram defensively, they should be gone, right? In that lineup.
Yeah.
So that's another lineup that I think could be fun and effective.
Yeah, I mean, it's always this balance of like finding enough defense and finding enough offense, just kind of in general with any lineup. But I do think that like with Brandon, I really would like to see some lineups where like he's not really needed to do that much defensively, and then he can just like really take the reins and just score. One thing I think that's underrated with Brandon is like you can give him the ball, and even though you don't want him to be your point guard because that's how you're back to like the Pelicans, but like the Pelicans, like, I mean, we can sign the Pelicans all we want, man. The Pelicans have been more successful than the Raptors recently. So, you know what I mean? Like in the year that they had the 49 wins, like Brandon ran a lot of point for them. And so I think in sort of backup lineups where he has the ball and other guys are guarding around him, but he's able to dictate and create some of that offense. And obviously the defense is going to focus largely on him. He's a good passer too. Um, and so him setting up and making the offense a little bit easier for some of these other guys, for Jamal to catch and shoot or attack a closeout, or same thing for Jacoby. I think that's a good sign as well. So yeah, I mean, with 12 playable players, as compared to like previous seasons where the rotation got thin pretty quickly, I'm actually pretty happy to see the Raptors sort of experiment. This is not the conversation we're gonna have today, but it's gonna be a big year for Darko because like the expectation is now
Yeah.
to win, not just only to develop, not just only to curate vibes and set an identity, which I think he's done a good job of. But the hardest part about the job is actually getting guys to win. And I think previous years he's definitely had the gripe of like, okay, look at the roster I have, look at the situation I have, like, how could you really expect me to win? Well, the expectation is now to win, so we're gonna need to see something new from the coaching staff as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, for all this talk about defense and ball pressure and all of that,
Mm,
the offense has to click through too, right? We've seen a lot of passing, seen a lot of assists, but that hasn't necessarily translated to offensive efficiency. So I
yeah.
think that's another big thing that he's going to be measured on this season. If you want to carry on our discussion, head on over to the Locked On Raptors Discord. The link is in the description. Will, why don't you let the people know where they can find your work?
You can find all my work at the Hello and Welcome podcast on YouTube. Recently, we just crossed 10K, which I was super proud of. We're going to have a couple of exclusive interviews dropping as well. We just did one with Alijah Martin, which I thought was just really fun and maybe professionally rewarding to do because I was able to sort of talk to his agent and talk to his trainers and really get a sense of who he was. And hopefully that came across in the interview. And of course, I think later this week, probably middle of the week, Wednesday or Thursday, I think we have something with Jamal Shed coming out. Full cards on the table. I love Jamal, man. I think I even told him to his face. I'm like, dog, you're probably my favorite player on the roster. So it was good to just set the vibes with him. But yeah, Jamal's a great interview. Probably the best on the team. I don't know if you would agree with that, but he's a great guy to talk to. And I'm looking forward to having people hear that conversation as well.
Well, hey, if he's graduating in being the best interview after Fred VanVleet, I think that's the lineage that we want, right?
Dude, you got to talk to 23 on the team. 23 on the team is the guy to talk to every time.
Thank you for making Locked On Raptors your first listen today. For your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast where there is no offseason. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right.